Is this new?
Yeah, this is from 4 days ago.
Oh my God.
Only 700,000 views on it.
You'll recall when I was last on Tim Pool's program, one of the things we talked about is I complained to him that like he spends so little time talking about stuff that are meaningful, like Social Security, although he did opine on it after reading 2 paragraphs of an article. That was his words, not mine. And I said, well, you spend so much time on like the notion of civil war in this country. He's been saying there's a civil war for, I would say, close to 10 years, or that one's going to happen. And I still don't think that there's going to be a civil war in this country. But I guess if it gets him on to trigonometry.
I mean, we have mass shootings, some of which are like politically motivated. We have issues.
We have
here.
militias.
Yeah, right.
Without a doubt. But that's not a civil war per se. But here's Tim Pool. Remember, you got to feel for Tim because his favorite band turned out to
be led by a trans person.
Be led by a trans person. That was very hard for him to deal with. And he thought a couple of years ago, I'm going to be making all this money from Russia. He didn't know it was from Russia at the time. It was from Gerard Depardieu or somebody like that. And then all that money went away. And so he's got to get back to the Civil War thing. Here he is. Also, you know what else I notice? He's wearing the exact same sweatshirt, too, every day now. Was he wearing that same one the other day that we were looking at, the clip of him?
Sometimes he has a blazer over the hoodie, but yeah.
Okay.
Like Abraham Lincoln was the bad guy? Or do we say...
He's talking about how Abe Lincoln suspended habeas corpus in the course of the Civil War.
Oh, so in other words, there was an actual war going on in the country, and Lincoln suspended habeas corpus.
Yeah.
Okay.
In times of war, a wartime president makes difficult decisions which are outside what our principles purport to be.
But we're not in the time of war.
And it's also as well, Tim. No, we're not.
So when
Tim, can I just make a point? And this
we are
is
in time of war.
Right. Okay. We'll come to that in a second. When the government takes away rights, it is very difficult, if not almost impossible, for you to get them back. Can we just agree that?
Yes.
So you are willing to give up rights in this society for the government to then come in and then enact against the enemies.
When have humans ever not done that? Give me one example. One.
In civilized society.
Not true. In World War II, the United States...
Let's pause it. Hold on for 1 second. This is... He wants an example of when people have never taken away...
It's funny because he's listing exceptions, right?
Well, that's the thing. It's like a double negative, right? When have humans not taken away habeas corpus?
It's like, well, I can mention the time that it was in Civil War. And also, okay, I'll do another example, which was World War II, which is, again, like, also, we shouldn't have done a lot of things that we did do during World War II.
Well, I think we can look back in all of our history and say there were things that we shouldn't do.
Right.
Like slavery, like extermination and genocide of Native Americans. Like internment, like
the current immigration stuff,
Jim Crow laws, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I'm not even necessarily convinced that once you suspend rights, they never come back. Right. It'd be much harder to put people into concentration camps. At least I like to think so. That are American citizens today. It may not be, but I would like to think it would be a little bit more difficult. It's going to be even tricky for them to put undocumented immigrants in mass concentration camps in this country. I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to be able to, but there's going to be, I think, probably a little bit more pushback. Now, maybe if we were at war with El Salvador or something, I don't know. I'm trying to come up with a scenario, but we're not at war right now by any stretch of the imagination or any definition. Let's put it this way. If we're at war right now, there is no time where we've never been at war.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Give me one example. One.
In civilized society,
Not true. In World War II, the United States implemented the U.S. Office of Censorship and banned people from
Well, obviously,
Yeah, but-
it's interesting that you say this because all anti-Ukraine people in America keep calling Zelensky a dictator for having martial law, which is in line with the Ukrainian constitution, and not having an election like the UK
Well, he
didn't have.
declared it, and the Constitution says that he can declare it and Congress can uphold it. There's an argument that he can overturn it.
Well, but my point is,
But I agree, in a time of war,
Right.
presidents do crazy things.
but you are stretching the definition of war way beyond its remit.
No, I'm not. It's called fifth and sixth generational warfare. So we have technological advances in conflict, and they alter how we perceive what war is. If you go back to the earliest days, what is the purpose of a conflict? Why do wars happen? Sometimes they're silly. You don't believe in the same God as me, so you must be destroyed. I mean, these are largely silly, but they have to do with cultural cohesion, so they come from somewhere from an evolutionary psychological perspective. But typically it's resource conflict. Resource is the principal driver. I do think it's absolutely hilarious that the East India Trading Company engaged in warfare that resulted in the death of 50,000 people because black peppercorn was a delicacy, was a luxury in Europe and the UK. But typically it's, I don't have enough food or water, and I will take it, and my people will not die. I don't care how I have to get it. And it's the same thing you see at the root level with a man who steals bread.
So we're going to pause it for 1 second. Wait a second. I just want you to know, like, I think what he was arguing is that we're at war right now. Instead, he clearly has boned up for this and studied about what is war about. And I'm going to I don't know what he read or listened to and memorized for this interview. But he's so excited to be able to project that he is smart enough to know that war is about resources unless it's not. And it's just about, my God's better than your God. And peppercorn, that was one of the anecdotes that amused me about the peppercorns. But the question is, how is it that we're at war? And he's basically come up with a new definition of war, a more modern definition, which is war that is so subtle that we don't know about it. Now, people used to call this economic war. Or just trade.
Also, lawfare is another sort of type of thing.
Without a doubt. Diplomacy. Diplomacy is really just sixth generation war.
When you think about it, we actually have been during World War III for the last
Don't
70 years.
make me quote Clausewitz. But even though I do actually happen to have the quote right here. All right, let's continue.
Family is hungry or whatever, we still frown upon it. So the generations of warfare, they evolve. We see the advents of new technologies and new methodologies in warfare all the time. If the purpose of warfare is to secure control of a population so you can control its resources, a tendency for that reason, sometimes it's, my God is better than your God, and your people must adhere to my worldview and my beliefs. So in the United States, we are going through, and this is not my opinion, this is academics who have assessed what warfare is.
Okay. Well, wait a second. If it's academics who decided this, well, then hello. Okay.
I'm not going to name one of them.
Yeah. All the academics, too, have lined up. We all have met and have decided, excuse me while I draw on my pipe, that Tim Pool is correct in his assessment of our new type of war. Go ahead.
Sixth, which we are going through, and this is not my opinion, this is academics who have assessed what warfare is. You get to fourth and fifth generational warfare, and now sixth, which people are going to argue it as we form these ideas in academia. Sixth may change, but fourth and fifth have to do with online political manipulations, manipulations of influence technologies, and use of insurgency. Today, it's fair to say that we are in a kinetic conflict. Civil strife began several years ago in the United States. Civil strife is not civil war, but there are many people dying. One of the easiest examples, of course, is Aaron Danielson took 2 bullets to the chest from a far leftist Michael Reinhold with a communist tattoo on his neck for no reason.
Pause it for a second. So one guy getting shot, and wasn't that 4 years ago?
It's a shot heard around the world.
Wasn't that 4 years ago?
I don't even know if it's the actual violence though. He's saying like the internet, the engaging on the internet, like this.
No. There's kinetic activity right now, which constitutes a sixth generation war, according to academics. Russ, you're arguing with academics, not with me.
I just want to be careful because it seems like we might be engaging now in an active war.
This could be. We're both being kinetic. I mean, it's true.
Maybe by the seventh generation.
There's kineticism here. There's kineticism.
There's some other good examples.
Wait. Let's continue on here. I want to hear about this.
Chest from a far leftist Michael Reinhold with a communist tattoo on his neck for no reason. And now we have the swattings of conservatives and the firebombings of Tesla facilities for the specific goal of destroying a company for political reasons, for which now Tesla stock has gone down. Partially, it's not the only reason. And we've seen Tesla evicted from the Vancouver Auto Show out of fear of terror attacks.
Oh, wait a second. I didn't know about the eviction of the Vancouver Auto Show. Whoa.
Sorry, I gotta take your mic down a little bit.
Oh boy, that was a problem.
Yeah.
We got to cut that out of the audio
Edit
version.
that out of the podcast. Yeah.
That was kinetic.
That was kinetic. I'm sorry, folks. I didn't realize about the Vancouver Auto Show. We are at war. This is war. Suspend habeas corpus for the sake of the auto shows.
I'm gonna actually skip a little bit ahead here. I mean, there's.
Whoa. Convenient, Matt.
Okay, I'll play.
So that we take him out of context, I guess.
Fine, I'll play this a little bit more and then we'll skip ahead.
Is war. Now, it may not be full-blown hot kinetic conflict, but when you have the arrest of Donald Trump's lawyers, we are dealing with administrative warfare, which is a degree of administrative conflict, which we don't see in previous times based on communications technologies. If you go back several hundred years.
What is he talking about?
Words mean anything. He's just stringing together words.
Yeah.
Administrative conflict. The arresting of his. Is he talking about Rudy Giuliani?
And the other woman who got that, you remember when you said, I don't care about the people that got arrested when you were in his studio?
I feel like I certainly said that to myself many, many times in my head while I was there. But administrative conflict that is now like what? So when you arrest a lawyer of Donald Trump's, then we're at war. Who are we at war? Okay, go ahead.
If a judge is arrested for like immigrant stuff or whatever,
Not so much war. That's not war. Okay.
Skipping a little bit ahead here where it gets a little bit more testy.
By sending American citizens to El Salvador, I will be opposed in every form that I can, and it's going to be interesting if it gets to that degree. That being said, when it comes to an actual wartime president in Trump is, when Trump issues a legal order, executive order, saying, we will not have these people in our military. I'm the commander in chief. He's allowed to do it. If a judge tries to stop him in this administrative conflict, Donald Trump, I believe, is obligated to say, I have heard the ruling from the court. Now try and enforce it, which is a play on Andrew Jackson's famous quote when the Supreme Court ruled against him. In the conflict we are in,
I love how professorial he is.
It's unbelievable.
was
this guy wasn't the Supreme Court. There's a whole legal process yet to go through, which is part of the American process. Now, I appreciate what you're saying, but it just sounds to me like you're redefining wars to give yourself more power. Which is what every dictator has always done in history, which is to say, the situation's so bad, I need extra power to deal with it.
Is Abraham Lincoln a dictator?
Well, look.
Yes or no?
We are not in a war situation.
Is Abraham Lincoln a dictator?
We are not in a war situation.
Yeah, was Abraham Lincoln a dictator?
We are not in a war situation. Is the point?
Okay, you are right. I'll just say you're right. Okay, now is Abraham Lincoln a dictator?
So look,
yes or no?
Tim, the theoretical examples you give.
It's not a theoretic. It's American history.
Fine, but it's not related to the current moment, which is what we're talking about.
So in the context
you're saying,
of,
let me just lay out the argument that you made. If I represent it incorrectly, you tell me. The core of your argument that you're making, right, is that because we are in a fourth, fifth, sixth generational warfare situation, a different set of rules ought to apply. It's a wartime, therefore, just like you can apply martial law, just like you can suspend this or that or whatever, right? And the point I'm making to you is this is the argument that every dictator in history has made. Now, I don't know American history as well as you, and maybe...
pause it. Hold on for 1 second. I got to take issue with that. I find it hard to believe that someone doesn't know American history as well as Tim Pool. But fair enough. Go ahead.
the point that you make about Abraham Lincoln is relevant in some way. But what I'm saying to you is something
But again, like, it's not relevant because that was during a war where Lincoln said, hey, Maryland, you can't go with the Confederates, otherwise it's going to be a problem for you, and didn't let them. And that was a suspension of habeas corpus. People don't view him as a dictator because he did that during the course of a just war.
There was also like a huge fracture within civil society during that time, which was the attempt of half of the society to secede from that society.
Quite a lot more violence, too.
Yes, I think that just a reminder, 500,000 people died in that war, minimum. I mean, soldiers. I don't know about the knock-on impacts of that, but and I would say what was our population at that time? It's probably a sixth of what it is today. I mean, that probably represented close to 10% of the population, maybe more.
completely different, which is we're not in a war.
Okay, so let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Was Abraham Lincoln a dictator, yes or no?
I don't know.
You don't. If a leader suspended the right to due process for all peoples, is that a dictatorial move?
It depends on the context.
So, like right now, if Trump said, I'm suspending the constitutional rights and due process for far-left terrorists.
Look, I'm not a legal scholar. That seems pretty...
Pause it for a second. Hold on for a second. Here's the problem with what Tim is saying. Who gets to decide that they're far-left terrorists if there is no due process? It is... I just can't imagine that there's this many people who don't understand what due process is. Right. Due process means that you can't just look at somebody and say, you are a criminal. That you need to actually prove that they're a criminal.
Yeah.
So the idea that you're going to suspend due process just for a subset of people is a ridiculous concept, because you cannot determine that they are actually part of that subset of people unless you provide due process. When you suspend due process for any given person, you have essentially suspended due process for all people.
We've already seen American citizens kept by ICE or immigration services in Florida. Got let out after a while.
Yeah. What if Donald Trump decided he was going to arrest half of the Washington state body because they were voting in favor of groups that were attacking Tesla facilities?
What does that mean, voting in favor of?
So let's say in their state body, someone proposes a bill that they will not arrest nor provide any assistance to any individual in their state who's caught firebombing Tesla facilities or other right-aligned institutions. The state will not enforce the law against them, nor will they aid federal law enforcement.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer to that question is legally, but my point to you is...
So, this is the problem. If you don't know and you have no thoughts on the matter, then I don't know what we're arguing. You can simply say, Tim may be right, I don't know.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm taking the argument that you're making and interrogating it as I do with every other guest on the show. So what I'm saying to you is, you've made the claim that we're in a war.
Pause for 1 second. The guy with the glasses. I don't know. Are these the two regular hosts on this show?
Yeah, this is the two trigger.
The guy with the glasses is looking at Tim Pool thinking, my God, I don't know if we've ever had someone so stupid, but yet so arrogant about it at the same time. It really does look like this guy is looking at, like, he's never seen anything quite like Tim Pool.
So what I'm saying to you is, you've made the claim that we're in the war in order to be able to justify suspending the rules applying equally to everybody. That's basically what you've done, right?
So
when I look outside
to the conflict,
when I look outside, I don't see a war that justifies that.
When you look outside in a largely liberal jurisdiction where everyone agrees with each other, you don't see anything justifying?
No.
We've traveled around the United States plenty.
And
I have never seen anything that justifies instituting
Pause it for a second. Now, I was in West Virginia And granted, this was 6 months ago, but it did not seem like there was a war going on.
Did you ask the academics that were?
Now, I will say this, Tim is living in a chained compound, and it is sort of one of the more awkward things, like a chained compound. And so he may feel like he's at war.
Is taking money from a country that is actually at actual war in terms of Russia, is taking money from them to say another country is undergoing civil war. Is that sixth generation? Is that fifth generation? What generation of warfare is
It's
that?
not kinetic if you've convinced yourself the guy's from Belgium.
In this country, no.
Firebombing of Tesla facilities, the shooting them up, the murder and killing of people for political
That should be
purposes.
dealt with
Yeah.
through the criminal justice system.
So, first, you are incorrect. I'm not arguing that
What do you say?
the conflict we're in right now warrants anything close to what Abraham Lincoln did.
Okay. Well, you kept bringing him up. That's why I made that assumption.
Because I'm trying to understand what your philosophical and moral view is.
Oh, here we go. Watch
what
out.
I'm saying to you is you can't.
Where do you
compare
fit into
context
the
I'm not.
Marvel
of the
Cinematic
Civil
Universe?
War with-
I'm asking you right now,
Yeah.
based on the American Civil War and what was going on, was Abraham Lincoln a dictator for suspending habeas corpus and arresting politicians?
which is sidestepping my point, which is right now.
I don't
where-
think you can answer the question.
I already did answer
You
the
didn't.
question.
You're ignoring
no,
the question.
I answered the question by saying you know more about it than me. You remember that?
So do you want to say I don't know?
I already said that.
So you're not sure.
I've already said that. But what I'm saying is the example you're bringing up is not relevant to the
Oh my
current
God.
situation.
Should Donald Trump invoke the Insurrection Act and send U.S. Army into California, Oregon, and Washington to start hunting down and arresting the terrorist cells that are organizing these attacks?
No, I think the law enforcement can take care of that.
They're not doing it.
What do you mean they're not doing it?
Well, I mean, we've had far left.
I
terroristic
can't
cells.
even honestly, I feel like subjecting the audience to this at this point. It really, we're total rubbernecking now. This is a total car accident. Like, he is now suggesting, and I don't know when they recorded this, and it has not aged well. If it was, presumably it was like a month or two ago when there were 8 Tesla vehicles that were lit on fire, and Tesla was prevented from going into the Vancouver car show. And I mean, you had reportedly the board of directors of Tesla waging war on Elon Musk by trying to find a replacement general for the Tesla motor company. But Tim apparently has some inside information that law enforcement is not looking for these people. But wasn't somebody arrested?
I imagine so. I mean, in this Tesla thing, it's like they're being very antagonistic to Canadians right now. That I can imagine that probably made it targets of
But
protest.
he's
They didn't want to deal
suggesting
with
that Trump should send in federal. I mean, it's quite possible that if it's happened over the course of 3 states, the FBI could very well be involved. Right. But he's talking about sending in some type of militia to round up these
Tesla
people.
terrorists.
The Tesla terrorists, these cells of terrorists that exist.
A quick Google search would indicate that people, in fact, have been arrested for some of these activities. But maybe not buying Teslas is also, maybe that's like 8th generation kinetic.
That is amazing. Tim, I feel like Tim is spiraling.
I want to know what
Those
happens.
are friendly interviewers too.
What happens if you say, yes, I think Abraham Lincoln was a dictator? Then what happens? Like in his argument, I was trying to piece that together.
Well, then Donald Trump can be a dictator because he's president too.
I mean, to be fair, like Lincoln did suspend habeas corpus. The original name of the term dictator, wasn't was value neutral in the Roman sort of era. But the reason we don't look at Lincoln as a dictator is because we agree with what he did. Most of us.
Well, I mean, I think, look, the question is does the circumstance justify extraordinary unconstitutional measures? And I think there's an argument on some level that maybe some of the things he did was unjustified. And I think probably had he lived and we had a sense of whether he had suspended them or not, but there's no What Tim doesn't seem to understand is there's no sort of like, although he has the academics behind him, all you ultimately ever get is a broad consensus. And the broad consensus is there's no like court case that comes down and go like, we found you guilty of being a dictator. There's a broad consensus.
St. Peter at the pearly gates.
There's a broad consensus of, whether a historical figure was a dictator or not. And sometimes contemporaneously, you cannot, you can't get a broad consensus. There are people who believe that, Trump is authoritarian right now, and others who would say, no, he's not. Or others who might say, we need an authoritarian figure right now. Tim doesn't seem to have understand that nuance. That two people could see the same facts and say, I do think that Lincoln was a dictator, and I don't think that Lincoln was a dictator. But I think the act of suspending habeas corpus in and of itself during a civil war is probably, I would think that most academics would not consider that consider him a dictator. Is that dictatorial? Maybe some might say maybe a little bit.
Well, you live in a liberal area where everyone agrees with each other, so you don't see that we're actually at war right now.
It's true.
According to academics.
It's true.
Why doesn't he go out and cover the war?
He's a war reporter.
Studio.
He's getting ready.
That's what he's doing.
I feel like he's gearing up a little bit
now.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.